Today we'll be discussing the topic of policy instruments for pollution control, conservation, and clean energy. So we'll be critically reviewing all the policy instruments, how they are better with one another, and what are the drawbacks or lacunas in some of our policy instruments, and what are the different updations which are being taken up by central government in terms of rules and regulations and their amendments and regular upgradations to ensure that they do not hamper any kind of sustainable development mission in our country. So basically, we'll be discussing about the different kind of environmental policy instruments, what is their requirement, what is their need in the overall structure of environment management in our country, what are the decentralized policy instruments. These are different types of policy instruments. So decentralized command and control regulations, market-based instruments in developing countries, especially in our country, and some of the examples of amendments in case of environmental policy instruments which have been recently introduced in some of our regulations. So basically, what is pollution? So pollution is introduction of various contaminants into an ecosystem, and these contaminants cause damage, they cause instability. A stable system becomes unstable after introduction of these contaminants, and they also cause number of disorders in terms of damage to the flora, fauna, and living components of the ecosystem, then harm or discomfort to the ecosystem. So sometimes there not be much disorder or much instability in short term, but in long term, harm or discomfort can also be a contaminant which is causing pollution. So it is basically in physical systems or living organisms. And as per definition of pollution, the introduction of these contaminants also acts as impediments to achieve our sustainable development. So for example, if we are not getting drinking water which is potable, okay, so which is satisfying all the 38 criteria of BIS 10,500 water quality standards. So what will happen? Even the industry which is dependent on these kind of water resources will also stop working. For example, all the kind of bottled water drinking companies, so Bisleri or other kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, all the industries which are directly dependent on water resource as their raw material will be stopped. So in long term, that even the development will not be sustainable. Leave apart the green component of the development, the economy will also not be able to survive without having access to clean natural resources. So that is the reason why we need to tackle pollution. And again, there are number of pollution these days: water pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, oil contamination. And if you have attended the last lecture which I had given on the last Sunday, so that in that also we had discussed all kind of pollution, what are their health impacts, how they can be tackled, what are their drawbacks, and what are the statistics like the quantity or quantum of pollutants which are being introduced in water, air, noise, solid waste, hazardous waste. We have discussed that all in the last unit. So elements of you can go back to that lecture and then come back to this different forms of pollution. So elements include foreign substances which can cause or it can be a naturally occurring. Most of the times these are foreign substances, but also natural occurring pollutants can also be introduced in our ecosystem, and they can also be considered as contaminants when they exceed their natural levels. So ozone, for example, it is not a contaminant if it is existing at a natural level, but if it is existing more than its concentration in troposphere, then also it is damaged. And if it is damaged in the at our polar regions, then also it is damaging if it is below the natural level. So sometimes you must be wondering why ozone is also considered as greenhouse gas and ozone is also considered, if it is not there, then also it is considered as hazard to human health, because at different levels of our atmosphere, at troposphere, stratosphere, exosphere, ionosphere, we need different kind of, we are already having different kind of gases at different concentrations at natural levels, but due to our human activities, anthropogenic activities, these concentrations are disturbed. So that is why we are discussing in this definition disorder or instability or entropy in the system. Okay, so what are the impacts? There is increasing size of different forms of pollution. It adversely affects the human health and economic activity as well as human health welfare. Then higher level of pollution can also reduce the ability of the environment to provide life support systems. So if there is the natural oxygen in the atmosphere is below the concentration required by a human body, then you have to have additional oxygen supply. Okay, so basically our life is at threat if we are not taking care of these pollutants in our environment. And again, there are many indirect impacts of pollution as well. There is increasing accumulation of toxic and non-recyclable or slowly recyclable waste, which results in high entropy or instability in the system, and it leads to gradual increase in intergenerational inequity. So what is this intergenerational inequity? Because in different generations, for example, in from one generation to another, there is a compromise on meeting their needs which are dependent on natural resources. So that is intergenerational. And there is another definition which we have already discussed in last units, intragenerational. So that is between within the same generation itself, there is inequitable distribution. For example, there is inequitable distribution in developing and developed nations. So that is an example of intra, intra. So but increase levels of pollution, they in the longer term result in intergenerational inequity. And in fact, the poor in present generation, they are also suffering, like diseases, TB, hepatitis, cancer, physical deformities, even this COVID kind of situation. In this kind of situation also, the people who were marginalized or who were economically not that stronger, they had more problems, they had to face more threat to their survival. So that kind of threat is significant for poor people, and that kind of threat risk is more for people who are not economically well off from other population. So on account of this also, there is direct exposure to contaminated waste. So all these issues definitely led us to find a solution which can control pollution. So how can we control pollution? There are number of ways, and we have been discussing all those ways, and in future lectures also we'll be discussing what are the regulations, what are the guidelines, what are the technologies, what are the best available technologies, what are the scientific developments, what are the strategies, tools. And one of those strategies and tools to control pollution is our policy instrument. So without pollution control, all the waste products which industries are emanating, which human population is emanating, resulting from the in our system, from consumption, heating, agriculture, mining, manufacturing, transportation, and any kind of human activities, even the activities which a human being performs in day-to-day life, that is also causing pollution, because because the population is very high. So whether they accumulate, whether they disperse, degrade the environment and hamper economic development process, there is a need of pollution control. So again, what is the significance of policy instruments? Why only policy instruments? Why not other strategies or tools? Why not we are just So there are basically three types of I think screen has again stopped. And so the three main types of policy instruments to control and regulate pollution, they are decentralized policy instruments, market-based instruments, and command and control instruments. So if you see the most popular and widely used policy control instruments, they include regulation of emission by designing standards. So all of you are well aware of Euro 3, Euro 4 norms. Okay, so and now Euro 5 is also coming. So these are all standards which have been designed for emissions, and these are introduced. They have to be implemented and designed in the features of automobiles by automobile industry. Okay. Again, we have taxing emissions. So whosoever releases more of greenhouse gas emissions, or whosoever releases more of carbon emissions, they have to pay charges for carbon credits. So again, taxing products which add pollutants before and after use. So this is based on the life cycle assessment of the product. So again, nowadays, if you see, there are products which are available with 4-star, 5-star rating. So all those products which are not environment friendly, they are not well sold by the dealers. Okay, so there is more demand of the products which are economically beneficial as well as energy saving. Then issue of pollution permits, like we have a permit of when we establish any industry, we have to take consent to establish and consent to operate. So when you take consent to establish, there is a format to be filled by any industry, and that format requires you to declare how much quantity of pollution you will be emitting during your activities. For example, I am going to set up a crusher, so I have to give the details of how many DG sets will be there, how many what will be the capacity of my crusher, how much SPM level I'll be raising, how much as PM 2.5 I'll be releasing. So all that detail is incorporated in the format that has to be submitted for taking the consent to establish or operate your industry. So it is a kind of permit. So if there is a release of pollution more than that, and if you have mentioned mitigation measures like spraying of water through tankers, or through control of decentralized dust control systems have to be installed under your projects, and you are not doing that as per your pollution permit, so that also again becomes a crime. So again, you have incentives for polluters to abate. You have labeled products, as I discussed, the 5-star rating, 4-star rating, 3-star rating. Then creating awareness among the users. This is also a kind of instrument. Before we introduce a ban, for example, recently we had a ban for single-use plastic. 19 items of single-use plastics were banned. So there was awareness created at central government level and state government level at different platforms. Then imposing deposit refund systems. Okay, so if you have if you are going to establish any industry for as per the environment impact assessment notification criteria, you come under that notification. You have to take environment clearance, and for that purpose you have to deposit CSR. You have to declare how much CSR you will be dedicating for the project, what kind of corporate social responsibility activities you will be doing. And sometimes even before you start your activities, you get your drawings cleared, you have to deposit a security with the municipal corporation. So there are many kind of pollution control instruments which are in place nowadays. And again, under polluter pays principle, so here it is the responsibility of the polluter to compensate for any kind of negative externalities from their activities in the form of taxes. So this polluter pays principle has been in action, has been implemented in many countries around the world for many years now, and there are many documents and many research papers. I have given few links at the end of my presentation. You can always refer to them to get more information. So basically objective of this unit will be, we have already discussed what is the need for policy instrument to reduce pollution, and you will be able to understand what are the different types of environmental policy instruments and what is the relevance of market based instruments, especially in developing countries like our own country India. So coming back to the advent of these policy instruments. So they started with beginning of modern environmental policy in early 1970s in US, when the first National Environment Policy Act, popularly known as NEPA, it was signed under the US President Richard Nixon in on January 1st, 1970. So at that time, environment policy was bipartisan issue. It was not, many countries were not supporting these kind of environmental policies, and they thought that most of the times developed countries thought that they would help in making environmental policies and programs to reduce environment pollution. And during this period, legislation was passed to regulate pollutants, so that go into the air, water table, solid waste, or any kind of ecosystem. So coming from 1970s to at present 2022, all the policy instruments are there for protecting and sustaining ecological resources. And the common goal of these policy instrument is to have achieve ecological improvement, to reduce emissions, CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions, and to avoid any kind of negative impact, and to create more of positive impact. So the time which we had for avoiding negative has already passed on. Now the time has come that we have to avoid negative as well as we have to create positive impacts at a double rate. Okay, otherwise there are no chances of survival. So policy instruments have to be attained to ensure that we have sustainable development, and all our ecological resources, they can be controlled as well as they can be preserved through policy instruments. So basically three groups are there. So decentralized policy instrument is also called moral suasion. So what is moral suasion? So if you have, one is persuasion. Persuasion means you have to tell something to people to, oh, okay, you have to persuade someone to do something, you have to coerce, you have to force, you have to get it implemented in a manner. Okay, but when you do moral suasion, you have to tell them it is your moral and ethical responsibility. In a decentralized manner, we try to implicate to larger population through their moral and ethical values. That is called your decentralized policy instrument. Then when you come to command and control, it is direct regulation. So you declare standards for all kind of ecosystems, for all kind of aquatic and non abiotic elements, for example water, groundwater, air, and also for different kind of industries, for steel industry, for thermal power plants, for wind power plants, for construction industry, for pharmaceutical industry. So all different kind of industries have been given certain stipulations and guidelines that these are the standards which you have to meet while doing your activities, while emanating any kind of pollutant into the environment, be it ambient air, be it water, effluent wastewater standard, be it technology standard. So for example, recently in steel industry, earlier there was induction furnace, but now they have introduced electric arc furnace. So that electric arc furnace is a new technology standard. So if they want to reduce pollution to a certain level, they cannot do it with conventional technology. For that purpose, they have to introduce new technology standards into their industry. So those kind of regulations, these are called command and control. And if you see market based instruments, these are instruments which are guided by our marketing strategies or economics of our country. For example, these are all demand and supply based standards. For example, emission taxes, subsidies, tradable permits. So these are basically monetary based instruments. Okay, so you get all the standards monetized in a manner so that people are lured to take benefit of those economic guidelines, and they can control pollution as well as get economic benefits for controlling those pollutions and for adopting green technologies. So those are called market based instruments. So there are further examples to discuss. Regulative instruments, they come under command and control. Permits, technological prescription, they are all regulative instruments. Then market based instruments include taxes, tariffs, subsidies, tradable permits. Procedural instruments, auditing programs, environmental impact assessment, then environment audits are there. Nowadays you also have impact assessment report for groundwater. So if your industry is dependent on extraction of groundwater for their domestic as well as industrial activities, they have to get consent from regional groundwater department or central groundwater department. Okay, so for that purpose, they have to do impact assessment report of groundwater resources utilized by their industry, as well as the mitigation measures like artificial recharge programs or rainwater harvesting techniques they are adopting in their premises. So they all come under procedural instruments. Even for recently, we have EPR, extended producer responsibility under plastic waste management guideline. That is again a procedural instrument where you have to get yourself registered for utilizing plastic in your industry for packaging purposes and for selling your products to the market in a plastic packaging, be it multi-layered plastic, be it fixed plastic, be it flexible plastic or rigid plastic. So again, we have cooperative instruments where commitments and agreements and roundtable action plans, harmonization, research is going on. So Department of Science and Technology, Ministry of Environment and Forest, and there are many other 20 centers under environmental information systems, which are also implementing research programs to provide more of information about environment and more for enable more capacity building for cooperative instruments like agreements and harmonization. And then you have persuasive instruments. Again, this comes under your moral suasion. Okay, so you deliver more of information, like I am delivering you more of information, more of knowledge, like IGNOU is playing its part in this delivering lectures on sustainability and educating masses and educating the youth of our country for adopting environment as a career and being to be a environmental professional. So if there are more number of environment professional in our society, indirectly or directly, you are going to play your role for environment protection and sustainable development. So in whatsoever field you are already working, if you are professionally trained for sustainable development, you will definitely be able to do your activities, do establish your industry in a more environmentally sustainable and conscious manner. Okay, so then you have more examples of policy instrument, like obligatory standard is there, a legal enforceable numerical standard, like how much milligram per liter is to be released. That is again an obligatory. Prohibition, ban, a total or partial prohibition, like single-use plastic has been totally banned. So that is a prohibition ban instrument. Then technological prescription, taxes, levies, subsidies, liability schemes, planning instruments, public investments, voluntary instruments. So these are all different kind of policy instruments which are already there in our country and which are already in action for control of environment pollution. So again, coming to moral suasion in detail, moral suasion is persuasion exerted or acting through and upon moral nature or sense. So important means adopted by various environmental regulatory authorities of different worlds of countries of the world to reduce environmental degradation and depletion. I hope through the examples we have discussed now, it will be very clear what is moral suasion. So we also have a Ministry of Environment, Forest, and now it is also known as Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Okay, so they exert pressure by issuing orders and they have to resort to legal actions. So considering legal actions which are there under environmental regulation, they are more stricter and more penalizing as compared to other criminal proceedings. Okay, because in other criminal proceedings you have to first prove whether that person is has done anything wrong or not. But in environmental regulations there is direct power to state pollution control bodies to issue show cause notices to the people, to industries who are causing pollution. And then if that person is not able to give any satisfactory reply or to implement any kind of mitigation measure to resolve that environment pollution problems, they can directly stop their supply of power and water, so that they cannot continue with their operation and continue polluting the environment. So that kind of power is given only under environmental guidelines and rules. So it is basically the aim of moral suasion is basically to manipulate the cultural environment. Okay, how to change the preferences of economic agents. For example, at present our environment has changed to more of consumerism. Okay, so people are happier when they consume more, when they buy more, when they purchase more, and whenever they purchase, buy more, they cause more of pollution in terms of more of utilization of products which are not required, and more of utilization of resources which go into the manufacturing of those products. So that kind of cultural environment needs to be changed gradually for meeting the needs of future generation. And again, we have an objective of moral suasion by providing information about ecological consequences. How so at present, whatever climate change events which we are observing around in different states, in different parts of our country or around the world, they are all result of climate change which we have been discussing 20 years back. So there have been many predictions by IPCC, Interpanel Government for Climate Change. Okay, so that IPCC has already declared how much pollution will be there, how much climatic change will be there, how much there will be a gradual decrease in groundwater levels and increase in surface water levels in coastal areas. So all that studies were already done, and there was much of information available about the ecological consequences of activities which are resulting in climate change. That's why we were able to control many such activities earlier, but still there is a lot of work needed to be done. And again, we have examples of decentralized policy instrument like financing the campaigns to really raise public awareness, product labeling requirements, voluntary agreements by the polluters or emission targets, then subsidization of research and development for alternative or eco-friendly technologies, and financing of basic research. So basically, these are all not from at the central government level. These are decentralized policy instruments, and different instruments are being used by universities, by colleges, by industry. So some of these decentralized policy instruments also come under your regulations and guidelines, like voluntary agreements by the polluters on emission targets. So you have environmental management system, ISO 14000 is there. Then you have GRIHA guidelines, you have green building guidelines as per US Green Building Council, US GBC Council is there. So these are voluntary agreements which are done by the polluters. Okay, I will release only this much of emission, I will cause only this much of pollution. If I cause more than this, my rating from platinum can go down to gold, or my rating from gold can go down to silver. So that is their voluntary agreement. But if we see from environment impact assessment point of view, if you have any such voluntary agreement already in place, that process also gets easier, because you don't need to approve them. Okay, you are going to comply with all the guidelines which have been given under environment clearance, because you are already adopting a voluntary agreement. So it becomes easier for you to get uh, a waiver from government bodies or state pollution control bodies in terms of their faith and trust on your industry. Okay, so that's why many industries are also adopting voluntary agreements, and they are also labeling their products as green products. For example, now most of the DG sets which we found in the market, they are green DG sets. Why? Because they have been they have been designed in a manner to ensure that there are acoustic enclosure, there is least noise pollution, the stack height is as per the design required by the Central Pollution Control Board, it is utilizing sulfur free fuel, lead free fuel. So all those design components introduced in the DG sets which are now available in the market, they are making it green in itself. Okay, so again, what are the drawbacks of decentralized policy instruments? So many people see that, okay, when we these moral suasion approaches are not that much applicable for people who are not willing to participate in bringing a change in the environment or reducing the environment pollution. So the changing price that firms and individuals face, they reflect the better environmental cause. That is their notion. And there is ability of prices to communicate relevant information. So if a product is available at a higher cost, and it is not subsidized, and it is not being given any grant or any fund or any advantage under voluntary scheme, so then it is better for the industry to adopt it, because they can appreciate the economic value of that behavior. So ability of prices to communicate relevant information is more appreciated by the non-supporters of decentralized policy instrument. But the moral suasion approach can therefore the moral suasion approach needs to change preference of the consumer, firms and governments. So whatever consumer is preferring should be given, should be implemented. Not they should not be just given a choice to adopt something voluntary. So that is what the people who are not supporting decentralized policy instrument, they feel. But what I suggest is every instrument, every policy measure has different lacunas, and they have different benefits, but we have to implement them at in different situations. All of them are required. So not just one policy cannot ensure that we have control over pollution scenario in our country, because there are different kind of products, there are different kind of market dynamics, and different kind of dynamics of environment economics which are going on for different kind of societies and different kind of scenarios in industries and in common population. So for that, from that consideration, different these policy instruments have different benefits. And if you see command and control regulations, it is also known as direct regulation. So it is very dominant method, especially in developing nations where people are more they are more concerned about their own survival rather than taking care of the environment. Because when we are not getting enough bread and butter, if I ask some rack picker, or if I ask some waste collector to collect MLP waste, multi-layered plastic waste, he will not be concerned about the environment, about the pollution, until he has arrangement for his own bread and butter. Why? Because that is the basic requirement. Without that requirement, he will not be able to survive. But after he attains some basic income from selling other plastic goods, I might sway him, I might give him additional benefits for collecting multi-layered plastic waste, which has no value for a recycler. Okay, so from that point of view, direct regulation and ensuring there is a regulation, there is a declaration that okay, you have to release only this much pollution, or you are supposed to collect back all your plastic delivered in the market. So that comes through command and control regulation. So it is an early environment policy which came into 1970 to reduce pollution and environmental degradation, and policymakers instituted standard based systems. So as per the prevailing legal traditions and as per the international norms, they have introduced standard based systems for different industries, for ambient air, for effluent, for wastewater, for drinking water. And it also sets you uniform targets for the firms to emit. Even the environmental policies of any industry, they also declare how much, what kind of activity they'll be doing, how much emission they will be controlling this year. Many industries now declare in their environment policy, we will reduce our pollution levels from 100% from this year to 80% to 50%. So that kind of command and control pattern of regulation is set through uniform targets and how much firms should emit by dictating their production processes, by introducing new technologies, best available technologies. So command and control technology can be can be of two types. One is through technology based and one is through performance based. But again, if you take a combination of both, you can get better results. If you introduce technology which is better to control pollution, which is more advanced, more digitized, or which is having better pollution control equipments in itself, which is utilizing better fuel, and which is giving you more efficiency, then obviously your emissions will be reduced and performance will be better. If efficiency is better, definitely performance will be better. Your raw material will be utilized in a more efficient manner to give you more and benefit of specific consumption. Okay, so specific consumption is again utilization of any resource. For example, if I am utilizing coal, so how much kg of coal is being utilized to give you 1 kilowatt unit of power? So that is your specific consumption. Okay, so if it is a thermal power plant, for example, if it is a jeans manufacturing company or a clothing manufacturing company, so per unit of clothing, which is, or per meter of textile which is manufactured, how much water is being utilized, how much effluent is being discharged, how much air pollution and ambient air pollution is being released, how much cubic meter of your SPM or PM 2.5 is being released. So that is called your specific emission or specific consumption of resources. So if you are doing performance based, this emission, your set standards which can be emission based, product based, ambient based, and technology based. So they are basically at various stages of production. So input, use, production technique, emission, output, location of emissions, and ambient pollution levels. So again, to explain you in more details, if you put up a regulation in the form of that, I will not be emanating more than 100 milligram per liter of SO2 or 100 ppm of NOx. So again, this is a kind of regulation which you have put up. Okay, so for example, carbon dioxide or SOx emission. SOx is basically SO2, SO3, and different compounds of sulfur oxide. So if per unit of fuel or per unit of time you are emitting any kind of pollutant, you will regulate that pollutant. Okay, this much I will emit in a 24-hour period or an 8-hour period. So there are different kind of monitoring strategies, also monitoring based standards, also how much, what should be the method or protocol to be followed for 8-hour monitoring, for protocol for 24-hour monitoring. That is also set by Central Pollution Control Board. So as per those protocols, if you are measuring the kind of emissions your stack is emitting, then you have to regulate that okay, I have to stay below that emission standard per unit of output or per unit of your product. Okay, so these measures are not cost efficient because they tend to be applied uniformly across the polluters. So even if it is a small scale industry, they have to also abide by these standards. And if it is a large scale industry, it also needs to abide. But if it is a large scale industry, it has better avenues, better economic strength, and better resources to adopt higher standards. Okay. And for medium scale or small scale industry, when they don't have enough resources, they can be given lenient standards. But this is not the case. In emission based standards, a uniform standard applies to all the polluters. Okay. So that's why this is considered as drawbacks by policymakers, that it cannot guarantee you achievement of higher standards, because even if an industry is having more of resources, better technology can be adopted by them, they will also all compromise on a level which is easily achievable. Okay. So therefore, command and control regulation should state that emissions should be as low as reasonably achievable, because a large population has to achieve it. We can't just think about the large scale industry. We have to think about even the small scale industry, which is unfortunately more in number in our country. Okay. So pollution causing industries are more, which are, but they are also contributing to our GDP, and they are also important for survival of population, for providing employment to a large component of our population. So we cannot ignore their contribution, and we cannot ignore their requirements to continue with their operations. So they have, from that point of view, command and control gives you a reasonable achievable target, and directing the controls at points closest to which the target is there is also called, namely ambient pollution levels. That gives polluters flexibility to how pollution reduction can be achieved. Okay. So again, for direct regulation, we have examples of Air Pollution Act. So Air Act was introduced in 1982, then Water Act, then Hazardous Waste Rules Act, then also manufacture, storage and import of hazardous chemical rules in 1989. So there are different kind of regulations. More than 200 guidelines are there, which come under the purview of environment, which control directly or indirectly all biotic and abiotic resources which can be impacted in our environment. Again, under command and control guidelines, we have ambient based standards. Ambient means which is directly in contact with you. Okay. So these stipulate a given maximum concentration of pollution in the receiving environment. So it is up to polluters to ensure that they do not exceed that stipulated standard. So since no one polluter will know that what has to be done to achieve the standard, ambient standards are best thought of as overall targets. So these basically set an overall target under the National Ambient Air Quality NAQ standards and AQQS. Okay. Again, we have technology based standards, which where the polluter can select the technology and they permit to adopt usually the best available technology. What is the definition of one is the cleanest technology. So cleanest technology can be sometimes very expensive, and sometimes there be a lack of technical expertise or manpower which can handle that cleanest technology in developing nations especially. So we have introduced a concept of best available technology, which is available in our local market or which is available in our country, and for which we have manpower to operate and to do its operation and maintenance. Okay, so O&M is again very important whenever you decide to introduce any technology in your system, because it is not just the cost of technology which needs to be invested for once. You have to invest in the running of that technology to ensure sustainable results and to ensure that the standards which you have which you want to achieve, that maybe the emission standards or ambient standards, they are well achieved if you adopt that technology. So it is it is attempt not to reduce competitive advantage. Okay, so again you have low scope for a flexibility of response. If everybody is told, okay, you have to implement cleanest technology, okay, so again the cost of their product will go very high. and they will not be competitive enough for other industries. Like the consumer will not be able to buy your product if you are raising the price, selling price too high because of the introduction of any cleanest technology. So to give the competitive advantage to every industry, they have introduced best available technology regulations. Again, there is a low scope for flexibility of response. A given technology has to be used. Like the example I've given you for the steel industry. In Punjab, especially, you have Govindgarh area. So that Govindgarh area is very polluted, and there are stipulations that it is a now an area where no new industry can be introduced. Okay, and whatever industry has already been established, they have to adopt best available technology. They have to get done with that conventional technology of induction furnace, and they have to introduce electric arc furnace, so that the standards of ambient air standards are met, and they are able to achieve least pollution scenario in that area. Okay. So in case of command and control approach, it is economically inefficient. Why? Because overall compliance costs are not minimized, and it is dynamically inefficient. Once the standard is achieved, the polluter will not be having any incentive to go far and above that standard. Okay. But in case of zero emission option or ambient concentration, this command and control instruments are most preferred. Why? Because people will definitely go for standards which are lesser than the zero emission option. So in that case, the best policy is to completely put a ban on the pollutant. Okay, as it has happened in the case of many pesticides which are very dangerous or for sustainable development, like DDT has been completely banned, and even some of the drugs used for the pharmaceutical industry, they have been completely banned. Then you have market based instruments. So what are externalities? Basically, to understand market based instruments, we have to understand the concept of externalities. So any kind of economic activity which generates pollution and that leads to cost to others. For example, and I have an industry near my house which is releasing pollutants, which is releasing high PM 2.5 every morning. Whenever I am going to take a walk, that stack is releasing too much of pollutants. So that will that will add up to my medical bills, that can cause asthma to me, that can be a deterrent for me to go for a morning walk, and again that can also cause obesity in longer period of time if I'm not going for a morning walk anytime, if I'm restraining from any kind of physical activity. Because every time I do some physical activity, there is more inhalation of air, ambient air, and there is more inhalation of PM 2.5, and I feel very dizzy, or I feel very unhealthy, or I'm not able to breathe properly. So these are all some indirect costs that are added to me because of someone's activity. And these kind of costs are called externalities, when I don't have any direct control over the activity of that industry, but I am directly being impacted from their activity. Okay. And then in order to understand the logic of adoption of economic instruments to reduce pollution, one has to understand why pollution arises. Okay. So if you will be able to understand the concept of environment economics, if you are able to understand why pollution arises, then you will be able to design better strategies, better instruments to control that pollution. Because economists consider pollution as a market failure which arises because of the polluters, because polluters have no reason to control pollution. They are not being given any benefit of controlling pollution. That's why they are not keen on getting that done. Okay. So when there is no demand for a product, if nobody is demanding for control of pollution, nobody is demanding for a better technology, nobody is demanding cleaner air, nobody is ready to give a value for clean air. Now, before COVID, nobody was able to understand value of clean air. When you buy a cylinder of oxygen, you definitely understand what is the value of clean air, what is the value of oxygen. But before buying a cylinder of oxygen, uh, you don't understand that whatever oxygen I am inhaling free of cost has also a value. Okay, so that is the reason for market failure. When a product is created but there is no demand for it, there is no value added to that product. Okay, so that then the product becomes redundant for the market and it causes market failure. Then the person who is investing in manufacturing of that product on, or investing in delivery of that product, for example in delivery of clean air, in controlling my pollution, if I am investing anything, I need to get something back for it. Okay, but if I am not getting something back for it, it will be a kind of market failure for me. It will not give me any benefit, it will result in losses to me. Okay, so ecological resources are public goods which are not exchanged in the conventional market. That is why pollution is called as market failure in terms of environmental economics point of view. So therefore no price emerges to indicate the relative scarcity of these resources such as air, water and forest. Okay, because we are very much habitual in utilizing these products free of cost, we do not even realize what is the value of these costs if it is not available to us. So market failure is the result of an market condition. So environmental problems are modeled as market failures using either the theory of public goods, where the market is defined as environment quality. Okay, or the theory of externalities, where the market is defined as the good whose production or consumption generates environmental damage. So basically, to understand more about market-based instruments, there is one activity. For example, a manufacturer releases contaminated effluents into the river. So that river is having fish population and other flora and fauna, which is getting destroyed due to the contaminated effluents, and the quality of water resources also going down. And this is the actual situation with all of our rivers these days. Even the village ponds, wherever industry is located in rural area, even the village ponds are being contaminated now. So what are the losses? So all the downstream area, wherever the runoff from that industry or wherever the groundwater streams are connected with that industry, so the downstream area of the river or downstream area of that groundwater catchment, wherever the commercial fishermen are living or wherever the downstream area agriculturists are thriving, they find their livelihoods under severe threat, because due to the contamination there is no flora and fauna. Due to the contamination there is degradation of groundwater quality, which becomes impotable, which we even cannot use for drinking purposes or for our domestic utilization. So there is again threat to recreational anglers or the people who use weekend pastime for activity, or while there are simply many people who are distressed by the loss of wildlife and damage to the ecosystems. So these are all losses which are reasons for taking action towards environment protection. So these are again externalities caused by an activity of a manufacturer. And what is the incentive? So because the use of the river as an effluent depository, it is free. So for the manufacturer, he is getting this release of pollutants into the river for free. He's not being asked to implement any kind of technology for control of effluent, and the manufacturer has no incentive to control it contaminated effluent. But if there is a regulation, okay, if you release more effluent than this standard, your industry will stop, or you have to pay this much of fine, or you will be penalized for this much of money, or you will be imprisoned for these many number of years. So that becomes an incentive, okay, for the person to take up some action. So in contrast to the permanent incentive, he has to reduce his labor size, materials, machinery, equipment, and energy inputs, all of which have cost attached to them. So if there is no incentive attached to control of pollution, and still he is doing it, then he will be losing everything in terms of labor size. For example, if he's establishing an effluent treatment plant, he will have requirement of more labor. He will have to make some investment for establishing that effluent treatment plant. There will be running costs, there will be power costs, there will be machinery replacement requirement every few months. So all those activities have cost to attach to them. So otherwise, if he's not getting any incentive, why will he invest in an effluent treatment plant? So that is why market-based instruments were introduced, so that he gets some subsidy, he gets some benefits, he gets some charge, fee or tax for every unit of effluent, the contaminant and contaminated pollutants which are released into the river. Okay, so in economic terminology, the downstream adverse impacts are called externalities. Okay, and to correct that market failure, we are placing a cost on the release of pollutants. So if there is a cost for release of pollutants, he will try to internalize that cost. He will try to internalize that externality of damage being caused to the river or to the downstream people. So that cost is fee, tax, charge, in any name you can declare it. In different kind of rules and regulations, there is a different term used for it, but it all comes under market based instruments. Okay. So it is very evident that due to higher pollution charges or taxes, the manufacturer decides to modify and alter the core production process. It is working with new materials which result in less waste and pollutants. So by adjusting the charge level or the cost attached to the effluent release, so regulators can ask for different degree of response from manufacturers, or therefore they are able to control level of pollution. So at the end of, polluter has to pay or compensate the damage. So this is also under the polluter pays principle. It is as per the polluter pays principle as well. So through the market instruments, any unaccounted social cost or benefits, they can become a part of that industry. They can become internalized in terminology of economics. All those externalities are internalized. That's why they can help us in environment improvement and sustainable development. So these are the common types of MBIs. These are charges or taxes. For example, you have water cess, which is there which is being implemented from last 25 years or more, I think. So from last 25 years, water cess is being charged for the industry who utilize certain quantities of water. And there are, then again, you have subsidies. For example, few years back, around 15 years back, there was subsidy given to any person who was implementing rainwater harvesting scheme. But now it is again a norm. Okay, all the universities, even the institutions, as per national accreditation, NAC council, they have, if they have to get accreditation from NAC, they have to implement all these things. But earlier, when these strategies were implemented, tools were implemented like rainwater harvesting, so they were given subsidies to adopt them. Even in residential areas, people were given subsidy to implement solar water heaters technology in their households. But now that has also being withdrawn. So now people have understood that they will definitely get economic benefit if they install solar water heater. So again, you have deposit, refund or rebate systems are there. Okay, so for example, in there are many refund schemes in terms of groundwater norms which you see these days. For example, there is a Punjab Water Regulation Agency. So in this case, if you want a large amount of water for your industry, either you go for groundwater restoration or pond water village bond remediation, or you pay for the quantity you are extracting from the groundwater. So there are rebate schemes, rebate systems, schemes, then tradable permits and emission trading is there. Then in tradable permits, recent example is for the plastic waste. So recently plastic waste guidelines, they came with an SOP, which is basically a protocol how to register for the EPR, for extended producer responsibility. Again, the extended producer responsibility is a norm where all the industries who are packaging their waste in any kind of plastic material and selling these goods into the market, they are indirectly responsible for generation of that plastic. So as per the sustainable plastic waste management guidelines, they have been commanded to collect back all the plastic which is lying in the markets due to their product consumption. So that for that purpose they hire some PRO, producer responsibility organization, and through that PRO, through that agency, they gave some charges to that PRO, and that PRO collects all the plastic waste that has been generated under that brand name. But now if an industry collects back all the plastic waste, 100% of the plastic, and if you require 80% to be collected, they are given a credit for the 20% extra collection. Okay, and that credit is again tradable. So if a person who has not collected any plastic generated by their industry in the market, they can purchase credits from the industry who has done extra collection. Again, in carbon emission, in CDM mechanism, clean development mechanism, if you go on Ministry of Environment and Forest website, there are several projects where emission trading and tradable permits are being given under clean development mechanism. Okay, for carbon credits or for greenhouse gas emissions. And then you have compensatory incentives. For example, under CAMPA, under compensatory afforestation project activities, you have to give certain funds to under CAMPA, so that whenever you are doing deforestation activities or cutting under trees under your newly acquired project land or for your project activity, then that compensatory fund will be utilized by CAMPA for reforestation or for the forestation of new areas or even the areas in the vicinity of your project. Okay, so they come under compensatory incentives. So I have tried to explain through different examples what are these common types of MBIs. And then you have taxes, charges, fees, which we have already discussed. There can be effluent charges on sulfur dioxide emissions. There can be tax differentiation between leaded and unleaded petrol. So tax differentiation, when it becomes for example, in petrol and diesel also. So there is tax differentiation for petrol and diesel, but that so that people are more attracted to adopt petrol rather than going for diesel. If they are purchasing a new car, they will go for CNG. Okay, CNG installed cylinder or CNG installed system, so that there is lesser pollution cost. For example, in electric vehicles these days are very costlier as compared to your petrol, diesel and CNG vehicle. But again, government is giving you subsidies. If some person has recently filed an ITR, they might have seen that there is a benefit for electric vehicle in your ITR. So those kind of tax differentiations are being introduced at different levels. Then there is user charge for public waste disposal. So for every kind of charge, for example, for plastic waste also, I have informed you about the EPR and about the charges which every industry has to pay. So if an industry thinks long term about the sustenance and sustainable development of their activities, they will think of some alternative products rather than keep on using plastic for packaging in future. Okay, so this is an incentive given to industry. Okay, if you are not utilizing plastic, you will not require to pay this money charge for the collection back of your plastic material from the market. Then depletion taxes on mineral exploitation, then stumpage fees for timber extraction. So all these are again examples of MBIs. And there are subsidies also to induce the individuals to alter or comply with the environmental standards. And there are many examples of subsidies like adoption of clean technologies, clean energy, and clean tax allowances are also there. And again, another kind of market-based instrument is deposit, refund, or rebate systems, where a surcharge is put on the price of a product. So a product leading to environmental resource or depletion, which is again refunded if you do not use that pollution causing product. So if the product is recycled or depleted resources is restored or regenerated, then you will get refunded. For example, you have refund schemes of plastic bottles. There are many at many locations, especially in Delhi and other metro cities. There are bottle banks are installed. So if you if you introduce your used plastic bottle into that bottle bank, you will get 1 rupee for every plastic bottle, PET bottle. Okay, so glass bottles, aluminum cans, and other containers. So again, you have reforestation and plastic plantation activities, as I have already explained to you under the CAMPA guidelines. So then you have tradable permits under green banks, water banks. Okay, and for plastic also you have credit exchange available. That SOP is still in process, and there is not a clear cut uh, dimension to how people should go about collecting that credit. But again, it will be introduced in due course of time. So it is basically all encouraging environmentally responsible investment, and they should be done through prudent lending from banking sector. Okay, again, you have green banking system, where the method of finance can be called as green banking, because banks play a major role in any kind of loan or funding solution. So those kind, whenever you are adopting some green technology and want to grow green, so bank facilitate environment for responsible lending and investment. This is called green bank. And again, at your state level bodies also, they have been given special, for example, in Punjab, there is Invest Punjab scheme is there, where new startups who are contributing to reducing environment pollution are given better subsidies. And there can be a better PV formation, like there can be a public vehicle kind of formation, or public private partnership kind of thing, PPP partnership. So those kind of modalities are available for projects which are environment friendly. Okay, then water bank is also a strategy to facilitate the transfer of water use entitlements from one location to another. So it is not that much prevalent in our country. I have not come across any water bank kind of scheme. But yes, there is a scheme when if you are adopting some pond for remediation, you will get credits for reduction, and you have to give less tax to the regional groundwater body. Okay. So in carbon trading, again, you have tradable permits for greenhouse gas emissions and marketable quotas for fish harvesting, or tradable depletion rights to mineral and water use. So all these rights are there. And these are again an instruments which offer you a dynamic incentive, so that you can ensure that given target is met, you will get some economic benefit. Okay, so the kind of price of allowances or the kind of economic emission trading can lead to significant additional administrative tasks. So those tasks again can be compromised by getting more of economic benefits. So compensatory incentives for restoration of environmental resources are also there, like I have already told you regarding the plantations, then increasing allowances for the poor and aged to compensate for energy and carbon taxes. This is again a strategy. Then financial aid for transferring of environment friendly technology to developing countries. So you will find many technologies which are environment friendly, but they are not that prevalent in developing countries. Okay, so in developing countries, if a developed country helps them, if a country or industry in a developed country gives financial aid to transfer of that environment friendly technology, so they also get, under international environment agreement, they also get benefit and incentive for that. So these all market-based instruments, these are widely used in many developed countries. All the different countries are using these instruments, and they are effectively reducing pollution over all these years. But question is, how relevant are these instruments for developing countries? So we are yet to develop expertise for utilizing all the state of the art technologies which are being utilized by developed countries. Then the experience of developing countries in implementing these MBIs is very poor, and they have not been proven, they have not been able to prove it effective in reducing pollution. So this is due to the lack of adequate enforcement mechanism, because our monitoring and enforcing bodies, which are basically the state pollution control bodies, and they come under the central pollution control board, they are not having enough manpower to control enforcement and monitoring at such a large scale, considering the large size of our population and large spatial dimensions of our country. So, but these MBIs are very popular in economies like South Korea, Malaysia, and Chile. And there is a slow progress of MBIs implementation in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, but they are gradually taking up pace, and they are being implemented in a larger manner, especially the industries, large scale industries. They are definitely adopting these MBIs, and they are more aware about the benefits of these MBIs. So it is evident that there are, for example, in Korea and China, there are charges for exceeding emission limits. Okay. And in India also, you will find that traffic police always asks you for a pollution control certificate. So that is again an indication, okay, pollution control is important. But how much your pollution certificate is ethical, or how much your pollution certificate actual gives you the data about the pollution being caused by your vehicle, is still questionable. But certain instruments are again introduced, and these instruments come handy in case of large projects. For example, if I go to some project implemented by World Bank or by Asian Development Bank, I can definitely ask that the whole fleet of truck should get their pollution control certificates checked before entering the project site and leaving the project site. Okay, so that there is total control whether that a vehicle is getting its pollution checked or not. And if I see any vehicle emitting unreasonable levels of pollution which are physically visible to you, so you can always question them whether they are getting their vehicles maintained, lubricated, and properly in a running condition, so that there is less of pollution being caused to the environment. So again, you have effluent charges in the palm oil industry in Malaysia. You have deposit refund schemes in Korea and Taiwan. So where you, if you are depositing something and you are not causing pollution, you are depositing a security for not causing pollution. And if you don't cause that level of pollution, you are refunded that security. So that these schemes are available in Korea and Taiwan. And then you have tradable water rights in Chile, and water bank concept is gaining momentum in United States of America to reduce water pollution. So again, if we want to understand from green food packaging, why, what are the socioeconomic determinants? So there are many people who must be asking this question after ban of single-use plastic. Why don't we completely stop these industries? Many people ask me, because industries cannot be stopped in a day. There are many small and medium scale industries which are providing employment to at least 2 to 5% of our population. Okay, so they cannot be stopped in a day, and there we cannot provide them alternative ways of sustenance and alternative ways of employment by stopping their industries in a day. So we have to introduce better concepts so that they can gradually adopt these new concepts and gradually upgrade their technology, upgrade their skills, and move on from packaging of their products in plastic to green packaging. So first there has to be a willingness to pay and buy by the consumer. Otherwise, again, it will lead to market failure. So there has to be awareness of single-use plastics and the damage being caused to environment by single-use plastic, so that people can really appreciate that they have an alternative. They can definitely appreciate an option of green food packaging and adopt that option. Okay, so that kind of willingness by consumer is required as a premium to pay for the green food packaging. And how much we can pay, that has to be determined by private sector. And how much a person can pay is again dependent on the kind of education level, on the kind of awareness he has. If I am very educated, and if I am very much aware about the damage caused by plastic waste, I'll be willing to pay. But if again I don't have enough awareness, if I'm not well informed about the damage being caused by single use plastic, I will definitely question the value or the price of green food packaging, and will not go for it. Okay, so that will again lead to not buying of that product and market failure of that product. So again, policy driven plastic bans by government and new technology adoption is an alternative solution. So these all criteria govern how we can control a specific kind of pollution. Okay, so similarly, there are different kind of pollutions and different kind of products which are causing pollution in our environment. So again, there is an example. I think I have already explained it to you during my discussion. So we have under plastic waste management rules 2022, we have been permitted to buy certificates to make up for the shortfall from any organization to have used the recycled content. And we have also introduced environmental compensation, which will be levied through the rules, which do not specify how much its compensation will be. There is a still work left in the standard operating procedure, SOP as they call. So that SOP will definitely in due course of time give you more details about the kind of protocol to be followed to get that refunding and to get that environmental compensation, and how that funds collected in this way will go to escrow account and they can be utilized in future by the government for collection and recycling of the plastic packaging waste, so that environmental compensation is done and so that there is large benefit to the environment. So these are some of the references which you can definitely go through for detailed information on this topic. Thank you so much. I would like to take up any questions you have.